suppose one other thing there. Okay. Anyway, as you probably all know at this stage, the polling day is Friday the 7th of June. The hours of polling are from 7 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock that evening. In relation to the... as I mentioned anyway, the date for the local election is the 7th of June. And we've recently received, as the polling date order was made by the Minister recently, and along with that, and we've got documentation setting out the process for how the election will be run. And for those interested in running as candidates, the first area then will be the receipt of nomination papers. So the period for the receipt of nomination papers is from 10 a.m. On Saturday the 11th of May to 12 noon on Saturday the 11th of, or the 18th of May. So there's a period of a week for the submission of your nomination paper. And the nomination paper is a formal process, and the nomination is to be received by the local election returning officer, who's Martin O'Donoghue. And then the closing date is the Saturday. Anyone then that subsequently decides to withdraw, if you're going to withdraw, you have to withdraw by 12 noon on the Monday following that, or else your name appears on the ballot paper. The nomination process then. So a person may nominate himself or herself as a candidate, or they may be nominated by someone else who has to be registered as a local government elector in the local electoral area for which they're running. The nomination papers have to be delivered personally to the local returning officer, and any person who reaches 18 years of age on or before the polling date is eligible to stand for election. We'll be putting advertisements in the paper shortly, or in the various media and radios, in relation to the nomination process. Then from a practical point of view, it's best to make contact with us in corporate services in the Kerry County Council to arrange a date with the returning officer that when you'll come in and submit your nomination. That makes it, streamlines it a bit, and it makes it easier to run. So, but I suppose the time deadlines for the process are strict, and it's essential that all the required documentation and the photos, etc., are submitted by the deadline date and time. So you have to have everything in by the final date on the Saturday. And in relation to that, there's two specific times that the returning officer has to be in place, and one I think it's either Friday morning or Friday afternoon, but also on the Saturday morning of the final date. So, but I think the best practice is to make contact with us, and we'll arrange a time when you would come in. As I said, you have to use the prescribed nomination paper, and if you're running with a political party, then on that you'll be setting out on that as well the political party you're running with, and the register of those parties will have submitted to us details, a certificate in relation to same. That's just to cover off the legalities of it. A candidate who is not running with a registered political party may, if they so wish, include the expression non-party after their name on the nomination party or on the nomination paper. A description such as independent is not permissible, so non-party, or you can leave it blank. So the name of the registered political party or the expression non-party, if is properly included in the nomination paper, must be specified. So if you're a non-party candidate, then there are certain requirements that you have to meet as well. So there's two options. One is you submit a completed statutory declaration, which is filled in by 15 people who are, I suppose, nominating you or assenting to the nomination, and that has to be signed by a commissioner of votes or a peace commissioner, or there's a number of options in it. Or else the candidate or someone on his or her behalf can lodge a deposit of €100 with the returning officer. Now, if you subsequently reach a certain number of votes, that would be returnable. If you don't, it wouldn't. The figures in relation to that will be set out in the documentation which we'll be giving out, so that will be fully explained. So once your nomination paper is submitted, the returning officer must rule on the validity of each nomination paper within 1 hour of its receipt. And they may rule a nomination paper invalid only if they consider that the nomination paper is not properly made out and signed, or in the case of a non-party person, shall we say, that the 15 people haven't signed the documentation, or you haven't paid the €100 deposit. So, as I said, the €100 must be paid, and it must be paid by the 12 o'clock on the Saturday. The specific requirements in relation to the provision of photographs, and it's important, as I said, and we will be circulating documentation. We'll have it up on our website as well, setting out the exact requirements. But a photograph has to be delivered with the nomination paper to the returning officer in digitised format, along with 2 identical printed copies. So 2 copies and a digital copy. The photograph must be of good quality and in colour, showing the candidate's full face, head and shoulders only, on a light background, and taken to a professional standard. The photograph must be taken not more than 12 months prior to a polling day, and each copy of the printed photograph must have the candidate's name in it. So that's important, you know, particularly if you're leaving it late in the day to submit your nomination. Just make sure you have all the necessary documentation in place. If you're with a political party, then the emblems associated with that party will be received by us from the electoral commission, and we'll have those. So then, if you've submitted your nomination and you're running for election, you can appoint agents to be present at a number of events that take place. One is the issuing of the postal ballot papers, which is a formal process which will take place in county buildings in Tralee here. You can also have agents at polling stations. You can have them for the opening of the postal votes ballot boxes and at the counting of votes. And again, there's a process in place in relation to the number of agents, and you know, you have to that documentations, whatever, will have to be submitted prior to the process, but we'll be in touch with people in relation to that. An important element is an act. It's the Local Elections Disclosure of Donations and Expenditure Act 1999, and under this act there's guidelines set out in relation to the spending limits that are in place in relation to the election, and these have to be complied with. They deal with donations on one side, so the maximum donation that may be accepted by a member of a local authority or a local election candidate is €1,000. The threshold above which donations must be reported by the candidate is €600. The maximum amount that can be accepted as an anonymous donation is €100, and a candidate in a local election or a member of a local authority who receives a monetary donation must open and maintain a political donations account in a financial institution in the state. So there's very strict guidelines there in relation to the receipt of donations and how they're managed, and you have to be able to show that is done in a proper manner. So there's a ban on the acceptance of a donation in excess of €200 from a corporate donor, unless the donor has been registered with the Standards in Public Office Commission and a statement is furnished to the recipient confirming that the donation has been approved by the corporate donor concerned. That's all to do with transparency and with ensuring that there's proper process in place. So SIPO, the Standards in Public Office Commission, maintain a register of corporate donors, and so if you receive a donation from any of these, you need to have a certificate in relation to it. There's a ban on the acceptance of any cash donation over €200. And if a donation is given through an intermediary, well, the identity of the person on whose behalf the donation is made must be provided at the time. And it's an offence not to provide this information. So I suppose, I hope I know it's all very technical and that, but I just feel it's important that you be aware of it. So just to kind of summarise on the main responsibilities and requirements. So you may appoint an election agent. You are responsible for the election expenditure they incur. You may authorise a person to incur expenditure on your behalf, but you must maintain proper records of the transactions relating to that spending during the campaign. And you must not exceed the spending limits that apply in respect of the area in which you're standing. If you're with a member of a political party, then the donation limits that are set out are slightly changed, and that the political party is automatically allocated 10% of that spending, so because they provide a process in the background. So that's that kind of area. So I went into the donations area there already. At the end of if you're successful as a candidate in the local elections, then by the 5th of September, that's 90 days after the polling date, you have to submit a statement of expenditure in the prescribed form, including a statutory declaration to the local authority, setting out how the spending during the process. And on an annual basis then, you have to submit to the local authority, not later than the 31st of January each year, a donation statement indicating whether during the previous year you received a donation, the value of which exceeded 600. So that's an ongoing process throughout the year. And you have to furnish with the donation statement a bank document in support, which shows the transactions through that account. So that would be a separate account to your personal account. Would be set up specifically for the political donations or electoral process. If you're unsuccessful at the election, you have also to submit a statement in relation to the expenditure in the prescribed form, and that has to be done by the 5th of September, and again the backup documentation from the relevant bank in relation to it. So I suppose, what are election expenses? Candidates are required to furnish in person to the local authority within the 90 days if they have incurred election expenses, and that's election expenses whether paid or not. So even if they haven't been paid off, you need to set that out, and that again is in prescribed form, which will be circulating to candidates. So the period, what is the period for which election expenses have to be disclosed? That period is set out in law, and in relation to the current election, it's the period between the 8th of April and the 7th of June. So it's kicked off already. And election expenses means all expenditure for electoral purposes on the provision of property, goods or services which are for use at the election. So again, we'll be giving guidelines out in relation to that, and in those guidelines there's frequently asked questions in relation to the various types of expenses and how they are measured, and if you have any queries in it, you'll be able to link back with us at Kerry County Council. I suppose the crucial question in relation to such expenses is whether the property, goods or services were for use at an election and whether their use took place during the period of the election. The limits are set out and they're broken down then in relation to they're based on the populations, and I'll go into those in a second. So, as I pointed out then, the limits set out the level of expenses that the maximum level expenses that you can incur in relation to the election process, and as I said, it's whether those are paid or not. It's whatever was spent, and it's important then that these are adhered to, because if it weren't the case, the limits would be meaningless, and it'd be open to the candidate to pay in advance for different things, and they wouldn't be shown. But that's not the way it works. If it's something that's going to be used during the election period, specified period, well then they have to be taken into account. So, in some cases, it may happen that stuff would be ordered prior to the specified period, maybe election posters or whatever like that, but the posters will be used during the election period. So that's just an example of that expenditure would fall for inclusion. The candidate spending limits. If the local electoral area is in an area with a population in excess of 35,000, for the non-party person, it's 15,350 is the spending limit, or if you're with a party, it's 13,815. Local electoral area with a population between 18,000 and 35, its spending limit is 13,600, or with a party, 12,240. Or if there's a local electoral area with a population of 18,000 or less, well then it's 11,500 or 10,350. So those limits are important. So it's important to know what's the population of your MD that you're running in, and that you're aware of the spending limits. And why that is so important is that the legislation is very strict in relation to disqualification and offences and penalties. So if the expenditure limits are contravened, this would be a serious contravention under the Act and would have serious consequences for the candidate subsequently, and it could lead to you being disqualified. So it's important to make yourself aware of the guidelines, what's in them, and what you can spend and when you can spend it, and ensure you adhere to that. Just in relation to posters, there's a timing in place in relation to putting up posters, and you can't put up posters only within a set period, and that's either 30 days before the polling date, and they have to be taken down within 7 days, I think, taken down within 7 days of the polling date. Sorry. 8th of May is the start of the date in relation to the polling. And then on a polling day, campaigning is forbidden, and posters must not be displayed within 50 metres of a polling station. That's important too. So as I said, we have full guidance for candidates, and we'll be making it available in the very near future. We'll also be putting it on our website. They should be read carefully and received, and if there's any questions, contact us in Corporate Services in Kerry County Council or the returning officer. So look, thank you for your time and attention. I know it's some of it is heavy, but if you're running for election or you're involved in the process, it's important that you're aware of these guidelines, and I hope it's of benefit to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christy, and thanks, Padraig, for that very detailed overview in relation to the operation of the council and the process around the elections. And look, as Christy said, it's it's a challenging process at the best of times, but it's so important to follow the process, because ultimately if it isn't done correctly, then the penalties are significant. And could you imagine all that hard work and getting elected and then something being wrong at the other end? Not what you want. Maybe at this stage there might be some questions from the floor to Christy and to Padraig. I think it's very important as well that, as Christy mentioned, all of this detail will be available shortly on the website. And the message I'm very clearly picking up as well from Christy is that if anyone has any questions or queries, ask. There's an open door in terms of engaging with the Corporate Services Department in Kerry County Council. And I'm sure, Christy, there's probably no question you haven't heard, whatever. So I suppose the most important thing is that there's an open door to anyone that has any questions or whatever. Do engage. It's important that you get the correct answers. So I think we have some roving mics.